A Hairier problem. Rise of the Furball by Blue Bastard, Chapter 24. First Princess of Nowhere. For some, the Royal Banquet Hall was far and away the largest room built solely for the purpose of food consumption they ever been in. Though normally the hall was reserved for state dinners with foreign dignitaries, it was used mostly for hosting extremely large parties like the Grand Gala, not a solitary group of 13 ponies and a phoenix. For others, it was a smorgasbord of food unlike anything they've ever seen before. The idea that the insensitive higher societies actually needed all this food went against how the majority of them decide attractively curvy, sexy frames for their body, while at the same time attempting to copy the long-necked look of the unicorns. But for two specific ponies, there were a few points that none of the others could see through. See, at the opposite ends of the table, Raspberry Barrel and Princess Celestia were directly in front of each other. The princess, forever keeping her calming, motherly smile to mask her true emotions, as well as practicing the art of watching somebody else without making it obvious. Most of the time, she wasn't even looking directly at Raz. Instead, her attention seemed directed at either side of the table, depending on who was speaking. But not once was her primary focus off of Raspberry. The whole idea of having the luncheon, against the advice of every single pony who served as advisor to her, whether or not she actually given them the post, was to put Raspberry Barrel into a more casual situation. The trial had been an outright disaster thanks to Blue Blood, but nonetheless valuable clues to the truth about the unicorn at the other end of the table were revealed. Not of her power, since it had been clearly demonstrated enough, but of her true character. For whatever reason, Celestia found it rather easy to draw parallels between Raspberry Barrel and Twilight Sparkle, where both had their shyness and could be naive about things. But the determination and courage they had to stand up for what they thought was right. The similarities cannot be denied. Yet at the same time, Celestia couldn't quite judge Raspberry. Twilight may have been reserved most of the time, but the Sun Princess has always been able to read her protege like the proverbial, and rather appropriate, book. Raspberry, however, was in the comparison of the proverbial black box. In this social setting, she seemed willing enough to engage small conversation with other ponies, but she was continuously on edge, it seemed, never venturing to start a new topic of conversation discussion, never talking out of turn, but she was continuously on edge, it seemed. Of all the ponies, she seemed to be eating the slowest of them all. Even her pet Phoenix was devouring pears at a faster clip. Celestia wasn't even sure Raspberry had made any indications she wanted second helpings. This was the pony that was clearly uncomfortable. But whether it was her own decision to not assume her less scary disguise, to hide the telltale traits marking her as Sombra's descendant, the nervousness of having to face the husband for Celestia directly, or that she made Firefly look as social as Pinkie Pie in comparison. And then there was the fact that Celestia was, for the first time in centuries, unsure of how to actually handle the situation. If Raspberry Barrel truly was the descendant of King Sombra, then she was the first pony of true royal blood inside character line, and in terms of his succession, was enough to make her next in line should all four alicorns become unable to rule. Maybe even enough to be more of a princess in Twilight. But of more concern was the massive amount of decent food Celestia couldn't shake off. Sombra had been one of the first real threats to her rulership, having challenged her at a luncheon very similar to the one she was in right now. In Castle Everfree's Royal Banquet Hall, she managed to hold her ground at the time, only barely, but the experience of having to be the end of his hostility had been enough to break her to tears while she was in the safety of her private chambers. Now she inadvertently set things up that it was happening all over again. Everything Sombra had become now sat across from her, even thousands of years later, and dodging her influence by who knows what reasons. Though back then, Sombra wasn't anywhere close to being reserved in personality, it just been difficult to read. This time, however, the most important ponies in her life were now all gathered in one place. She would gladly lie down her life for any one of them. She could only hope that this terrible mistake of hers couldn't yield such catastrophic results. Princess Celestia, as Barry stated evenly, it's kind of creepy how you've been staring at me with that fake smile for the past few minutes. Huh? What? Celestia couldn't believe how off her game she was being. First, the most important ponies she could possibly have gotten together at once, now in possible danger. Now she let herself be caught in her intentions to watch Raspberry. She seemed to know that smile wasn't genuine. It's alright. I knew you were going to do the second we sat down across from each other. Admittedly, I was doing the same thing you were doing. You were staring off into space like an idiot, joked Celestia, though she wished her smile was more convincing. No, get a feel for who you are and what you think of me. It was easy, it would appear our feelings toward each other are mutual. What's going on now? Grumbled Apple Bloom, her voice full of food. Everybody else had gone dead silence to realize what was going down. The business of which we are here in the first place, of course, answered Ras, was just answering the question of what to do with somebody like me. Now, darling, interrupted Verity. Well, that is what we are here for. That's being too generalized. After all, it's the whole point of this nudging, so we can all understand what's going on in a slightly more intimate yet casual manner. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Rarity. But I'm afraid it's not going to work until the proverbial white elephant in the room has been dealt with. Elephant? Squealed Pinkie Pie, rapidly looking around the place. My apologies. Since I didn't mean it as an insult. So, but the dark unicorn with Celestia dead in her eyes. Your Highness, you're scared of me, or rather my powers, aren't you? I wouldn't call it fear exactly. More accurate to say I have concerns about your abilities. Please, Your Majesty, I would prefer if you were honest. If what you want to be happening here is for me to be open as possible, then every party here needs to do the same. Celestia let out a massive sigh she didn't know she'd be keeping. Alright, if you must know, what you have shown to be is a mere taste of the raw magic you have at your hoof tips. I do feel the need to be just as cautious around you as I have been around Saber himself before he took over the Empire, or with Luna when I was too blind to see to lend to Nightmare Moon's birth. A glint of gas sounded off from the ponies on both sides, Luna being emphasized above the others due to how Celestia was being rather too open about the situation at Hoof. Sister! Starting in all serious. Celestia looked over sadly at her sister. I am Luna, as much as it pains me to admit. First she turned back to her Raspberry. Might as well explain why, since you'll probably want to know that as well. I already do. Raspberry replied somberly, but Celestia sock. Can't say I'm surprised either. What Saber did with back magic was unforgivable. Though, not like he cared about it, since all it seemed he cared about was power. Since you mentioned I'm royal lineage of his cursed blood ran his veins, it's perfectly reasonable you would see me as a threat, not only to your position as the main leadership figure, but the protection of every pony in it. More than that. Celestia dropped a fake smile, her muscle now bearing a hard line of a non-muscle bearing. You must understand, it's only because of the ponies in this country have faith in me and my fellow princesses that there are not riots in the street, though there are still those calling for your blood to be spilled. Of course, the same could be said for why I was not of the same opinion. This is the faith I had placed in Twilight and her friends for Ponyville. They lobbied on your behalf, but I still find it hard to believe you when... Raz suddenly groaned, exasperating at something. Why does that damn news article keep showing up at the worst times? Celestia raised an eyebrow quizzically. News article? Yes, because anything I learn about what follows me around, no matter how hard as I try, is a damn obituary. She rested her hose on the table, rested her head on them, continuing despite being muffled. Might as well let everybody know of yet another heinous crime I've committed. Well, if you insist, replied the tallest Alicorn, wondering what the real story was going to be as she winked into her presence the piece of paper Discord found that morning. Wordlessly, she motioned for the article to be passed around, with each assisting reader expressing complete shock and or horror at what it described. This can't be true! Exclaimed Verity, the last time you see the article. Boss, darling, did you actually murder him? With blurry eyes, Raspberry lifted her head to look at Rarity. Her face evident of fear being felt of how dislayed the felon would change things. Of the ponies who were there, I would be the only say it wasn't murder. But I know that, no matter how you look at it, I did commit patricide. Is that why? Rarity was struggling to get the words from her brain to her mouth as she began to realize the intentional omissions from Raspberry's earlier personal recollections. Your father didn't kick you out. You ran because you killed him? There was no immediate answer, just everybody looking at Raspberry while the red and black unicorn nearly looked down the table at her mostly eaten plate of food. Heliodor had since moved from the provided bird stand and was now trying to comfort his mistress. You know what I think? Sully spoke up Applejack, who of all ponies had suffered the most from murder, being why her parents were not among the living. Voice carried a decade of remorse and anger. No, Slice, pleaded Apple Bloom. This ain't my life. It stops wearing fisting for ruin. You knows how many air ponies last. But it's a mean to make up the werewolves. What? Exclaimed Celestia, Luna, Shiny, and Keaton saw at once. They had been informed of lightning dust lycanthropy, hence why she was even in attendance due to needing constant surveillance in case he started to go feral. But everything else was new information to them. Land sakes, no, Apple Bloom, answered an alarmed AJ. I'm only yes, I'm still not happy about the fact she accidentally turned me back into a werewolf. She then noticed the three princesses and one prince, all having become several shades paler than normal, and reacted to that bit of news. Also, got a crazy embarrassment. I don't really should not say that out loud. No, but it will have to wait, said Twilight, taking charge of the situation. There's obviously it's a lot going on here that follows Raspberry. But if what you were about to say is what I think you were about to say, AJ, then before this mess gets even more complicated, we should hear Raspberry's side of the story. But how do we know she's even telling the truth? Accused Stringbow. No offense, Beryl, but you haven't been exactly honest about anything as far as I know. Well, I think that's why it's a good thing she has Heliodor then, said Fireside, her voice barely audible from how she sunk below the table. After filming his prank, I did more research about phoenixes and learned about the feeble green ones as well as the usual red variety. It was sort of confusing since Philomena is red, but she seemed more like a green. Philomena's mother, Verna, was in fact a green phoenix, said Celestia, her composure coming back gradually. But you are correct in the fact that Heliodor is green does improve things. As green phoenixes are allegedly destined to pair up with a pony they deem as pure of heart. Only ponies with pure of hearts don't murder their dads, do they? Skeptically asked Raspberry, now finally sitting back upright as she rubbed a hoof on the back of the bird's head. Thank goodness none of this came up in the trial. Blue Blood would have gone wild with it, commented Shining, realizing how lucky that passed over a bit of information had not been used. Yes, but I think what needs to be done is clear, added Rarity, turning to agree early at Raspberry. As Applejack was going to say in all likelihood, much of what has occurred would have been avoided, as Raspberry told us the whole story. The whole real story, that is. And we ponies are willing to listen. I believe so too, Rarity, nodded Celestia. So, Raspberry, it's time for you to come clean too. Just who are you? Who am I? Rhetorically asked Raspberry. Looking for legs to let Heliodor take his perch on her horn. I am Raspberry Barrel, inheritor of Sombra's curse, and the only pony unlucky enough to have been born in Lonesome Dove and not be an Earth pony. 25 years ago. Torchwood stood on his porch, facing away from his homestead. It had been easy. Coming to Lonesome Dove was risky, no matter how any pony looked at it. But his wife, Glass Ruby, had been supportive of the decision. So here they were, on a parcel of land he would soon plow and plant seeds, from which crops would grow. He would prosper here. He would become an important family, as the settlement was relatively new, a potential for him to be the patriarch of a new family lineage as the same level as the Apple family, who 75 years ago founded the town of Ponyville. And he smiled, knowing that soon he would have a strong son who would, given time, grow into a fine stallion who would help him farm to prosper, and eventually take over the farm when his father's body failed him. Yes, he thought, this will be a bright new beginning. A loud wail erupted from the house, then a silence that only interrupted by the cry of a newborn. But, since he felt wrong, very wrong. His heart sinking, Torchwood raced to the house to find all his dreams crushed in the instant. There, in the bedroom of a small farmhouse, were 3 ponies waiting for him on the bed. His wife, looked like she hadn't slept in years, was still breathing heavily in the aftermath of labor. Paying no attention to the midwife or the bundle of her forelegs, Torchwood rushed to the side of his wife. It's over! Someone wailed the exhausted mare. Oh, thanks, Celestia, it's over.
But what about you, my love? Asked Torch. Are you all right?
I'll live, answered Ruby, letting out a chuckle. If only for the sake of you or your child, I'll recover.
You'll be the best mother any colt could ask for, my sweet Jam.
Interrupted the midwife. It's a feeling.
I beg your pardon?
Quickly asked Swords, not understanding the idea that the baby wasn't the color he'd been expecting. Granted, no pony, not even the doctor, had been able to reliably predict the gender. But with the hoping and praying and dreaming he had done, Swords had been sure it was going to be a boy. Yet, as the midwife brought the newborn to greet his parents, what lay inside the bundle was certainly not the earth pony color he had been expecting. Instead, it was a unicorn filly, a lock of sky blue lilac hair for her mane, such an inch from where his horn shot out of her skull, her coat a rich raspberry hue, and her eyes a warm maroon. Oh, she's beautiful, cooed Ruby, weakly spreading her forelegs to take the infant to them. I don't think we could have asked for a better child, don't you, Torchy?
Yeah, of course not.
Lied the stallion through a false grin, though he knew his wife would believe him. In truth, he was crushed. He wanted, no, demanded a cult of earth pony lineage. Furthermore, it didn't make any sense as to how a pony of unicorn lineage could be the product of two earth pony whose entire bloodlines were pure and untainted by the other pony types, as far as back as history could remember. Pardon me for asking, the midwife sheepishly commented. I do find it curious a unicorn would be born to two earth ponies.
Are you implying my life was unfaithful?
Snapped Torch, like some of his anger at being denied the son he rightfully deserved, though he had to admit it was a possible explanation. Hilton wasn't, though, because he loved Ruby dearly and expected the same of her. No, Torchy, you're the only colt I would ever want to be with, assuaged the new mother as she cradled the baby. But I may know the reason for why our bundle of joy will have the gift of magic and not of strength.
Why?
Asked Torchwood, midwife simultaneously. Ruby smiled before recalling an old family legend. My family bloodline goes all the way back to the Crystal Empire, believe it or not.
Impossible! That place never existed, nickered Torch.
Oh, but it's true. Remember how I said the blending mane was a special trick of Valley come did? That's like completely natural. The only proof of the crystal blood in me. Looking at her filly, CC has it too.
But I thought the crystal ponies were, for the most part, all live ponies.
They were, but therein lies the dark too. You see, when King Saba was defeated, his last act was to curse the Crystal Empire, making it fast entirely. Some of his unwilling slaves managed to escape and disappear within the main population of Equestria. But before that, some of those slaves had been relegated to his own kind of personal harem. Obviously, the same of those poor mares had been the personal secretaries of that bastard king, meanwhile they would never mention him. Was never know of one that carried his offspring when they fled. That's horrible, guessed the midwife. Indeed, but there's no reason to worry. True or not, that was 1,000 years ago, and this has, babe, nothing to do with Sombra.
So, what do you mean to call it, her? Asked Torch.
I just know the name Raspberry Barrel. In present day, Raspberry Barrel sighed unhappily. I can't say for sure that's really what happened when I was born, but from what I could glean of my father's rantings, that was the best I theorize. But didn't you say that your mom died when you were born? Pointing out Twilight. Raspberry nodded solidly. I did tell you that, but beyond bestowing my name upon me, my mother may as well have died the second the cord connecting to me was cut. She grew extremely ill the next day. Her immune system was weakened from the strain of childbirth. Despite everybody's best efforts, she died before I was a week born. Oh, I'm sorry, said Cadence, already tearing up a little. No ponies should grow up without knowing their mother's embrace. Well, I do wish I could have known my mother. I have a memory of her beyond that one photograph she had done and hanging in the dining room in a gravestone under one of the few trees on the far side what should have been the farm. Only, I must be honest, I don't think I ever knew the pony my father had been. While his expectations had been delayed when I was given to him instead of the son he felt he owned, he'd been crushed when Mom died. He loved her dearly, and to lose her not only deprived him of any means to get the son he wanted, but possibly the only pony he truly cared for and lose from death. The one pony who he felt deserved the fruits of his dreams more than he. have it all taken away from him so quickly. With only me left to be nothing but a constant source of demands, no promise of being any use to the glories he wanted. I just don't think his mentality could have handled all of it. Did, did he neglect you? Asked Pinky, who had grown up in what seemed to be similar circumstances, considered her father to be a very tough parent, too. However, unlike Raspberry, Pinky's father had its own taste for her sisters, Marble and Limestone, and Maud, because he wanted a son instead. Worse. Oh! Collectively said all the other parties. What was implied needed no elaboration. Well, now hold on a second, said Shining. You're going to be descendant King Sombra, right? With all your respect, your highness, that's probably one of the stupidest questions any pony has ever asked me. I mean, after all the black crystals popping up around me, the fact I got a stalagmite growing out of my forehead for a horn, and in fact my bloodline is earth as far back as any pony cares to know, aside from the most evil unicorn in history, forcing yourself into it, I kind of stuff how else I can make myself look even more like Sombra, unless I start going crystals in a horribly strangled voice. I think what my brother means, Raz. That's why I clarified. So while your appearance and actions are unique for ponies who have used dark magic, the truth is conventional magic studies can't confirm those are truly signs of you are Sombra's bloodline, just a result of long-term dark magic usage. To be fair, Twa, interjected the Applejack. Considering you're yourself a mage, she knows more about dark magic than any pony here, much less at all of Equestria. She sure she's got Sombra's power, so I don't really see how we can't trust her later. Plus, she wasn't a part of Sombra's kin. How do you explain the man's pretty things he's laying? Or how about your own mission well, you were there, Twy. Well, see, explain what happened this morning can only happen because her magic's like this. I don't know what happened this morning that I faltered magicking you girls, but I can help support her claims since I've been sensing magic similar to Sombra's for some time now. As I told my fellow princesses, follow letters I sent a few weeks ago. Wait, you knew the truth about me this whole time? A scandalized Raz exclaimed. Well, yes and no, Rasberry, said Luna. At least in cadence, we've noticed some pony or something out in the world whose magic is the same type as Sombra's. So you of all of us would know since you had to keep that shield going for a brief resurrection, since we didn't know who. Obviously, it is you. So we have to answer to the question instead of going on a chasing hunt. Yeah, that would have ended badly, sighed Raspberry. Though certainly not as bad when I got my cutie mark. 15 years ago.
That better be some kind of joke, Beryl. Even though I would have expected your sense of humor to be better than that,
said Torchwood. In the decade since his wife's death, having been struck with no child save for a whiny unicorn brat, only recently finally been any use on the farm, he turned to drink and now almost never seen without a half-empty bottle of liquor somewhere close by. But father, really is my cutie mark, answered Raspberry. For Philly had grown up under the cruel hoof of her father, denied basic education as she was forced to work the fields, to make up for having replaced a son that never was publicly treated as something to be embarrassed of. This is supposed to be the best day of her life. I told you, I can use my magic on the farm, I can.
You can do nothing right,
screamed Torchwood, getting to his feet from the worn-out chair he was sitting in.
You take my wife away from me, and any chance of having a son, much less a child worth having and anything having, and have the worst working ethic of any pony ever lived. Now you don't even have the decency to get a cutie mark that doesn't serve to mock me of my failures!
Indeed, to his horror, Raspberry's barrel cutie mark was that of brightly colored gems, apparently linked to her magic as he was levitating a few gems in a purplish black aura. Raspberry backed up slowly, knowing what was coming, so she didn't try to dodge the glass ball smashing to her face. His prior experience taught her that no matter what, she never got out of these situations without having the bottle caving itself deep into some part of her body. This time, however, the ball scored the side of her face, painfully scratching the surface of her eye. Ah! She screamed, falling to the floor, hooves clutching at the bleeding eye, doing little to stop the blow.
Yeah, I'll teach you, huh?
Said Torchwood, now angry that half ball of good sorrow music on the waist. For the first time in a long while, was something other than professionally disappointing in his offspring. Listeners filled from wounds only stained blood for a few seconds upon contact with the floor, before darkening and hardening into what seemed to be black crystal, dissolving it into nothing. The implications of what convenient forced Torchwood to pause, gazing upon the thing that was the only piece of his life left to him, as he looked back at him, the wounded eye already having healed up, as if the broken ball had not hurt her in the first place. Most damning was the gems that had been levitating right before he had struck her, and her magic grip had been bright and shiny. When left alone, their true nature was revealed, and a dark course visible for the world to see.
Did you make those gems?
Half asked, half whispered Torch. What?
Did you make those gems with your magic?
Rasberry didn't understand. Yes, I mean, no. I used my magic to make them, but they could still be sold to help fund the farm, can't they? Torchwood was silent. The ball handling followed from the floor, shatter on the floor. Then, the most controlled tone of voice Rasberry ever heard from, he spoke.
I should have known. Unicorns are all really demons.
Where? What? No response, but the trained Torchwood moved to grab Rasberry by the horn, dragging her as he went to the tool shed.
I've been blind to the truth. So much trouble could have been avoided if I just paid attention.
What's going on? Wailed Raz, scared of what might happen. Don't try to break off my horn again, Daddy. I'm sorry, please.
No, you're not sorry. This is why there'll be no mistakes.
There's no freeze for the old saw you've been used to pictures.
I'll correct at least some of your mistakes. At least.
She was now flowing freely as she was held down on the ground, her head locked by her father's strong foreleg. She realized too late what was going on when the first tooth of the saw she felt at the base of her horn were connected to her skull. Then her father pushed the saw forward. Ah! Gasped Rasberry. Suddenly convulsing violently and shooting her head back with wide eyes, throwing Heliodor off her horn. A little bit comical as he also now started crying and hyperventilating. Rasberry, darling, are you alright? Inquired Rarity, and the rest of her seemed to be on the other unicorn's side. The suddenness of the dark unicorn's behavior had everyone else on edge too, some having gone to their feet to help if need be. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you for your concerns, all of you. It's just that all the days my father did, making the day I got my cutie mark into the worst day of my life, is something I can never forgive him for doing. Not when he took away my magic so painfully, traumatically. Not when he ruined what was the happiest moment I ever had at a fucking farm. I know this may sound horribly inappropriate, constantly started Rainbow. But, you mentioned that weird regenerative ability of yours where you basically can't die, much less sustain severe injury for more than a few minutes. So I had to ask if your horn regenerated after it... Well, when your father basically destroyed it. No. As far as I know, it's the only part of my body I can't regenerate near instantly. I don't know what my father did with my original horn. For all I know, he told somebody in town to drop it in a canyon or something. I guess you could say I was lucky he didn't cut deep enough to my skull to kill me that way. But I was left with a plateau of bone that was nothing more than a slight ridge on my forehead. Maybe wear a bandana over it. Hide what was left of my horn to make me look like an earth pony like him. Truth be told, I probably wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for the constant back-breaking labor he forced me to do, since I was still somehow growing at the same time, so my physical condition was well above average for a unicorn mare my age at the time. Only, I learned a few weeks later that just because my horn had been ruined didn't mean I couldn't use magic anymore. See, I was alone in the fields while my father was sleeping off another hangover, when, for whatever reason, the sky exploded into a rainbow. It must have seemed from all across Equestria. That was probably me doing my first sonic rain boom. Must have caused many things to happen that day, supposed to Rainbow. Unless what you're about to say was another bad thing. In case it totally wasn't me doing my first sonic rain boom. First, I uncharacteristically hit Rainbow, and hearing for a sight of blue Pegasus, realized she had been accidentally hit by her yellow counterpart.
Rainbow,
The shy one said.
take responsibility for it, since it was from my stick you were even in that race at all.
Raspberry, contrary to expectations, laughed slightly.
It's alright, Fluttershy. Especially since that Rainbow's how I learned how my magic hadn't really left me. On the field alone, I remember marveling at its beauty and wanting to share the experience with some pony else.
As if the only pony I actually ever knew was my dad, who I obviously wasn't going to bother with, so I really wished for somebody to be with me. Next thing I know, my forehead starts shooting out magic and forms into a perfect copy of me.
Like that fake double trick you did back on the Everfree Ruins?
Realized Apple Bloom.
Uh-huh. I can even demonstrate it, if your majesties will allow me, of course.
Well, not for the four princesses. Raspberry closed her eyes and lit up her horn. The bubbling mass of purple was showing when she reopened them, released misty trails of purple, her eyes having turned green and red. For the record, my mastery of dark magic is such I can actually control this whole eye effect thing. It distrays my eyes a little, so unless I need my full concentration on something else, I normally just leave it off. She then turned to the wall and fired a beam of magic at it. Being stopped midway, pitching down 90 degrees and slamming to the ground. Then, like a mold being filled with fire, it was a perfect cut and piece copy of Raspberry Farrell, formed from the ground up.
And you could do that without your horn?
Melody said Twilight. Giving an ace was Raspberry Farrell was essentially a difficult self-duplication spell.
I could 15 years ago, with a horn that's even easier. Though, since it doesn't take more than a few seconds for me now. Anyway, this is my dark magic duplicate who I named Truth.
You named it.
Does that mean it's like a sentient familia? Asked Luna, disapproving frown on her muzzle. What? Yeah, dark magic can do a lot of things, but it can't create life. Now, Truth here is basically a full-size puppet that I can give basic orders to.
To demonstrate, Raspberry flicked her head as if giving command, and Truth wordlessly began to trot in a circle around the table a few times, before coming to a stop at the exact place she'd been created.
When I learned I could do this without my horn, life did start improving me for a little. From that point on, Truth acted in my stead to take the blows for my dad. All I made is so her wounds wouldn't instantly heal as they do for me. So he never caught on to deception, and I wasn't subject to his regular physical abuse anymore. I practiced making my fake gems, partly in the hope of somehow being able to change my fortunes in life. That was the only thing I could do. Working on that plot of land wasn't easy. There's so much buried diamond there, but most of the worthless variety. A little cook girl didn't need support ourselves was sold in town by Dad, along with the mighty diamonds, though he blew most of it on blues anyway. When the diamonds started to run low, there was simply not much to do. So I practiced my magic, though my feelings of my anger towards my father grew. He denied me every step of the way towards having a chance of being a regular pony by keeping me cooped up on his farm, trying to mold me into something he could say was his, without being embarrassed by it. Unfortunately, he ended up informing in town about it all during his many drunken supers, which a few years later came to a head. It had been one of those long days when Torchwood had gone to town to sell what little his sad imitation of the farm had reduced in excess of bare necessities. Having been nothing but cause of shame and embarrassment, he still forbade Raspberry Barrel from coming to town, usually having made it clear she was not to leave the house, to even work on the farm while he was away. When he returned, he reeked of booze, went straight to his lonely bed, not even berating his daughter for being a useless bitch like he usually did. Raspberry was thankful for the small mercy, said those continued to be rare, but after eating her self-prepared dinner of carrots and oats, she quickly washed up before heading to bed herself, waiting for the next dreary day to come on with challenge she needed to overcome just to survive. For 15 years that had been her life. The last 6 being especially bad, she had to wear an annoying bandana around what only been the real thing separating her from the other ponies in the first place. Before she tucked herself in, she removed the bandana, looked at a dusty mirror, and the stump on her forehead. Someday, Raspberry, you'll have a life worth living, she mumbled, turning to sleep once more. Not being a long sleep, maybe only an hour had passed before she heard a large crowd of ponies approaching the premises.
Burn the demon! Burn the demon! They cried.
Lady Raspberry realized her father must have gone on about how he was cursed with a unicorn child that used dark magic or something. From what she knew, this year had been especially bad for the community, caught in the grip of a devastating drought. Without a dedicated Pegasus weather team to relieve the pressure, the massive reduction in crop production as a whole was leaving the town angry and hungry. With horror, she realized that every pony blamed her for the trouble. Possibly her father as well for causing it by sawing off her horn 6 years prior. But she didn't have time to even think about trying to convince the town folks otherwise. Not when the crowd started throwing torches at the house. The house timbers dried from the lack of rain, instantly caught fire as soon as the blaze was wrapping around the house. Raspberry essentially made to gather what she needed before fleeing the burning house. What sadly was only a small pile of bits she managed to accumulate over the years from what little her father brought back. Using the bandana normally required a higher horn stub, she fastened a small pouch hanging on the end of a stick before having to leave her room when parts of the roof started to fall in. However, she only made it to the dining room before she was tackled by her father.
Trying to leave, are you?
He snarled. Combination of sleep deprivation, drunkenness, mixed with the still lingering effects of his last hangover, general insanity etched on his face. The house is on fire, you idiot! She screamed back, trying to get free. We need to get out of here!
I'm the master of the house. I'm the one calling the shots of what we do.
Eversley picked up his star and threw it against the wall, ignoring the house burning around him. The angry crowd outside. He was like a taskmaster who disturbingly took sadistic pleasure in making his charges feel pain. His sadistic grin faded, however. She saw a change pass over his daughter while she got back to her host. Not anymore, she grunted. Self-restraint finally broke into floodgates of her anger flew open, letting 15 years of emotion flow freely. For years, you kept me locked up on this broken piece of shit of a farm, constantly deriding me as the cause for all your failures, for all of your broken dreams. But now I'm putting an end to it! Zeta threw her head back and gave a cry that was inclined to the point the crowd outside stopped chanting in fear that the demon was going after them now.
Hey, guys? Maybe this wasn't such a bright idea. What the fuck are you?
Choked out Torchwood. Fear quickly bringing back sobriety to him for the first time in years. Somehow, despite having removed her horn and asserted its disposal, it was obvious the dark magic within her was still readily available at her hoof tips, if not more than ever now. The effect it had on her was a kind of metamorphosis. Her colors all shifted to dark hues of red and black. Two razor-sharp fangs making themselves known as he gleamed in the light of the fire raging around him. But most disturbingly of all was the stub of a horn pushing its way through her skull, forming a new and much more sinister-looking horn as it was a key to the signature, dark bubbly mass that was a magic aura. Your daughter! Coldly declared Raspberry, completely submerged by her rage, and without realizing it, Raz charged her father with her horn lowered, headbutting him the wall and impaling him on her horn through the heart. With unearthly screams, he poured magic to her horn, masked by the eye-bulging reactions on Torchwood's face when he finally rolled up and his last breath escaped through his lips. With a grunt, Raspberry dragged her father's corpse along the wall and threw it against another one, removing him from her horn, though his blood now stained the tip of her horn. Also note was that something else came out of Torchwood. His heart had been crystallized into being a heart-shaped black crystal, similar to the raspberry-colored one on the unicorn's flank. What? Gasped Raspberry, grabbing at the act she had committed, knocking sense back into her. As she looked at the reflection of herself of what had been in her father's heart, she saw the monsters he had become. Oh, Celestia, what have I done? You killed a child-abusing son of a bitch! Don't hate yourself! You go, girl! Woo! She hated her father, that must have been true, but she never would have wanted to harm him. I, on the other hand, did. Even laying a hoof on him would have been to put her on his level. But now she committed patricide, though at the time she got beyond murder. And she had sinned so greatly she became some kind of freak. Rising sound and the angry mob outside the still burning house, however,
Made it clear she still had any indication to live. She needed to flee and also dump quickly. Grabbing her satchel of bits, she paused only briefly in front of the picture of her mother. Too big for her to take her whenever she went, she noted tragically. Thus she made sure to degrade the only image of the parent who really loved her, for she would have never fond memories of her father. She had disappeared through the back of the door as the only world she had ever known crumbled behind her. Silence once again filled the hall. The task of breaking the somber mood not any pony would want.
My father may have been a terrible parent, but if there's anything good about what he did, say he taught me to be a good pony. Even before I truly realized my relation to King Sombra, the biggest monster I knew was my dad, and I knew I didn't want to be anything like him. The fact that I killed him in blind rage 9 years ago, I feel like the only way I can ever forgive myself for that, even if it takes me my whole life, is to be as a good pony as I could possibly be. Obviously, it's difficult with my handicap of dark magic being the only magic I could use, but as easy as it would be to harm other ponies for me to keep going, I will not go to that level. The one my dad lived on and made my life a hell in the process. The other ponies nodded in acknowledgement, but there wasn't anything more to be said, at least not until Celestia spoke up. Raspberry Barrel, thank you for being this open for our benefit. I have just one more question for you, personally. Yes, Your Majesty? Celestia took a deep breath before saying her final question. Raspberry, if I parted you right now, on the spot, let you go wherever you wanted to do without worrying about being in trouble about your dark magic, what would you do? I would go straight back to Ponyville. Beg God Cashmere to forgive me for not telling you about my secret. Being merciful, I would keep living life the way I had been before Nightmare Night. Living and working through Traveler's Retreat. The only difference is I try to find a way to prevent what happened with Spike ever happening again. And not stop selling them altogether, as they are no longer my means of supporting myself and healing anymore. But if you don't need them to survive, why sell them at all? Because I could enjoy selling them more for what they really be instead of thanks. And even give them away if I wanted. As long as he made other ponies happy, the way I could do something good with my special talent. Celestia nodded but said nothing for a few long minutes. Then with no outward emotion, she reassumed that fake, motherly smile as she gave her reply. I see. Thank you, Raspberry. That'll be all for you. However, before I'm willing to let you go, leave you a key part to explain this whole werewolf business. Raspberry paled, not exactly keen to explain her werewolf business at all. Later, Celestia mulled over her choice, along in the chambers. For all she knew, Raspberry Barrel was just as good pony as any other. Better than some, even. At least she knew the answers to why Raspberry was absent from the census records when she was a filly. Her father purposely tried to hide her, after all. Not because of trying to hide a potential perfect assassin and assert control of the country. Instead, he was an asshole! He tried to hide her from the world simply because he did not want to know the world to know his one child was not what he wanted. Purely selfish reason, destroying one of the happiest times in a young pony's life, because he had felt self-entitled. Celestia could not in good conscience condemn such a pony to a terrible fate, when the majority of the constituency was full of ponies that deserved to be jailed more than her. But at the same time, she could not let a pony whose self-professed special talent and heritage with those of King Sombra would still kill another pony, who had father even, without immediate remorse, who had committed the greatest chain of forgery dealings in history, even if it was only for personal survival, and unintentionally referred to being a werewolf after a year of every pony believing she had truly been cured. While that instance had been under extremely unique circumstances, the fact of nearly being touched by dark magic caused Appletech to revert. The potential threat Raspberry posed to the country should she lose control again was a horror words could not convey. Raspberry Barrel, for all intents and purposes, was just as powerful and dangerous as Sombra. Her judgment would have to factor into that. At the same time, Raspberry was the opposite of her predecessor, truly good pony at heart, so in order to remain seen as a fair ruler, Celestia would need to take that into consideration as well. It'd taken hours, but she finally settled the decision. The Equestrian courts would never forever condemn it as controversial. A lot of the werewolf business that would never see the light of day in public if all went well, how fate had wronged Raspberry Barrel for 25 years. It's the only toast that would satisfy all sides. The only choice that would save Equestria is to Fair Fist managed to send Demosin and save Lilo's plan to create a new werewolf army. Which, thought Celestia with a wry smile, will only happen with the help of the fairy power to create a werewolf 1,000 years ago.